The rain in Seattle came like a quiet curtain that night, thin and constant, whispering against the tall glass windows of the Pierce residence, a sleek, modern mansion of steel and wood perched on the hillside overlooking Lake Union. Inside, everything gleamed: marble floors, designer furniture, soft jazz humming from invisible speakers. But despite the perfection of her surroundings, Emily Carter Pierce felt a hollow ache in her chest. She sat alone on the sofa, a glass of Merlot untouched beside her. At 43, Emily was the kind of woman who drew admiration without trying. Her long, chestnut brown hair framed a delicate face with intelligent hazel eyes that carried a mix of warmth and quiet sadness. Years of yoga and careful eating had kept her slim, though lately she'd stopped caring about the small things, like counting calories or matching her jewelry. She was a woman whose beauty had matured, no longer the fiery confidence of youth, but the grace of someone who had built, loved, and endured. Logan wasn't home yet. Again. She glanced at the clock, 11:47 p.m. The dinner she had prepared hours ago had gone cold. She knew better than to text him now. The last time she did, he replied with a curt, "Meeting ran late, don't wait up." She had told herself for months that it was just work. Logan Pierce, her husband of 18 years, was a tall, impeccably dressed man of 46, with a sharp jawline and neatly trimmed beard that had begun to show streaks of gray. To everyone else, he was a success story, the kind of man magazines loved. Self-made, confident, charming. But to Emily, lately, he had become a stranger who smelled faintly of expensive perfume she didn't wear. Once, Logan used to bring her flowers just because. Now, the only bouquets that arrived were for clients or events. Their marriage, once built on laughter and late-night talks, had become a polite performance. She tried to ignore it, to remember the man she had met 2 decades ago. A young architect who believed in dreams more than deadlines. But somewhere along the way, ambition had replaced affection. At midnight, she heard the distant hum of his car pulling into the driveway. Emily straightened, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, as if trying to erase the evidence of her loneliness. The front door opened, and Logan stepped inside, his black trench coat glistening with rain. He looked surprised to see her still awake. "You're up," he said, loosening his tie, voice low and tired. "Couldn't sleep," she replied gently. "Long day?" "You could say that." He poured himself a drink without asking if she wanted one. His movements were practiced, almost mechanical. "Another client dinner?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Logan's eyes flickered, just briefly. "Yeah, the Carter Project. You remember the couple I told you about?" "You mean the couple from Portland?" "That's the one." Emily smiled faintly. "Strange. I thought that deal closed last month?" He hesitated, then forced a chuckle. "They wanted to renegotiate. You know how these things go." She nodded, pretending to believe him. For years she had trusted Logan implicitly, but lately, every word from his lips felt rehearsed. He kissed her forehead lightly, distant, and went upstairs. She waited until his footsteps faded, before letting out a long breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Later that night, the rain grew heavier, echoing softly against the skylights. Emily lay awake in the dim bedroom, watching the shadows of tree branches dance across the ceiling. The digital clock glowed 2:18 a.m. She turned toward Logan's side, empty. The bathroom door was closed, faint light leaking beneath it. She heard him speaking in a hushed tone. At first, she thought he was on a work call, but the way he whispered, the nervous rhythm in his voice, it was different. She slipped quietly out of bed, bare feet silent on the hardwood floor, and stopped near the door. "Yes, I'll have it done before the anniversary," Logan was saying. "The accounts will be separate. She won't know a thing." A pause. Then his voice softened, intimate. "Don't worry, Chloe. I promised you, remember? We'll be together soon." Emily froze. The name cut through her like ice. Chloe. Her mind raced. Who was Chloe? His assistant at Pierce Developments, 27, blonde, always smiling too brightly at company events. Emily's stomach twisted. For a moment, she thought she might faint. Logan ended the call with a low laugh, then water ran from the faucet. Emily slipped silently back into bed, her body trembling. She kept her eyes closed when he returned, pretending to sleep, but her heart pounded so loudly, she was sure he could hear it. He lay beside her, scrolling through his phone for a moment, then set it down and turned away. She stared at his back, the broad shoulders she used to lean on, and felt something inside her quietly collapse. Morning came gray and cold. The lake shimmered under thin fog. Emily made coffee mechanically, her hands steady, but her mind in chaos. The voice from last night replayed again and again. Separate accounts. Before the anniversary. We'll be together soon. She didn't cry, not yet. Instead, she felt a strange clarity settling in, a mix of fear, anger, and resolve. Logan came down the stairs in a crisp navy suit, looking every bit the successful executive. "Morning," he said. "Morning." She handed him his coffee, forcing a smile. "You've got a busy day?" "Meeting with investors, then lunch with the board." He kissed her cheek lightly, the gesture hollow. "Don't wait up again, okay?" "Of course not," she murmured. When he left, the silence in the house felt heavier than the rain outside. Emily sat by the window, her reflection ghostly against the gray light. For years, she had believed in the story they told others. A perfect marriage built on love and success. But now she saw the cracks, sharp and deep, running through everything she had tried to hold together. She picked up her phone and stared at the screen. Her thumb hovered over Rachel's name, her oldest friend since college, the only person she truly trusted. But she hesitated. What would she say? "Hey, Rach, I think my husband's cheating with his assistant and planning to steal our savings." It sounded insane, yet the whisper of his voice replayed, undeniable. Before the anniversary, their 20th wedding anniversary was in 3 weeks. Emily exhaled slowly. If Logan wanted to play games, she would learn the rules first. And this time, she wouldn't be the fool who smiled for photographs while her life unraveled behind the scenes. The morning light crept through the mist that hung low over Lake Union, casting a pale, silver hue across the city. Inside the Pierce residence, the air was quiet except for the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. Emily sat at the marble counter with her laptop open, coffee gone cold beside her. She hadn't slept much. Her thoughts were a relentless storm. Logan's whispered voice, the name Chloe, and that chilling phrase. She won't know a thing. Now, Emily needed to know everything. She opened her email, scanning through old messages. Logan's inbox was synced on their shared iCloud account, a practical arrangement they'd made years ago, back when trust had been second nature. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she clicked, "Sent mail." Most messages were routine. Contracts, invoices, meeting schedules. But one stood out, a booking confirmation from a luxury hotel in San Francisco, dated 2 weeks ago. The reservation was under Logan Pierce, but the billing address wasn't their home. The email had an attachment, a scanned receipt. She opened it, heart pounding. 2 nights at the Argent Bay Hotel. 2 guests, paid with a company card. She remembered Logan had claimed he was in Portland that weekend for a real estate seminar. Emily's pulse quickened as she stared at the line item. Romantic package, champagne and chocolate-covered strawberries. The words blurred before her eyes. She felt her throat tighten, but no tears came, just the hollow burn of disbelief. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. It wasn't time to break down. Not yet. Later that morning, she drove through downtown Seattle to meet Rachel at a small cafe tucked between two art galleries. The smell of roasted beans and cinnamon wrapped around her as she entered. Rachel Summers was already waiting, waving her over. At 42, Rachel was striking in an effortless way. Curly auburn hair, olive skin, a laugh that filled a room. She worked as a journalist for the Seattle Observer and had an instinct for truth that bordered on obsession. When Emily sat down, Rachel's eyes immediately narrowed. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. "I can tell." Emily forced a weak smile. "No, you were right, Rach. Something's wrong." "Tell me everything." "Over cappuccinos," Emily explained. "The late nights, the phone call, the hotel receipt." Rachel listened in silence, occasionally jotting a note in her leather-bound notebook. "You're not crazy," she said finally. "You're married to a man who's lying. But listen, don't confront him yet. Not until you have real proof." "Proof?" "Emails, bank records, anything that ties him to this woman." "You said her name was Chloe Benson?" "Yes, his assistant." Rachel smirked, but her eyes were sharp. Classic. Men in power always think they're subtle, but there's always a trail. That evening, Emily returned home determined. She began combing through their shared financial records. Logan's office computer was password protected, but the household desktop wasn't. He often used it for travel bookings or printing invoices. She navigated through the browser history, her heart thudding with every click. At first, nothing unusual. News sites, business reports. Then she found it, a saved bookmark titled Cedar Trust Online Banking. She frowned. They didn't have an account there. Her stomach twisted. She clicked. A login screen appeared, but it was auto-filled. Logan had saved his credentials by accident. The account balance made her breath catch. $126,000. None of this money appeared in their joint tax filings. Emily scrolled through the transactions. Several wire transfers, some to jewelry stores, others to a boutique hotel chain. Then one name repeated, C. Benson. The memo lines were vague. Consulting, reimbursement, gift. Her hands trembled. Each click deepened the betrayal. For years, she had believed their life was built on partnership and honesty. Now she saw how much of it had been smoke and mirrors. She printed every document, each page a nail in the coffin of her illusions. The next day, Rachel came over after work. The two women sat at the dining table surrounded by papers and receipts. Rachel whistled low. "He's been careful, but not careful enough. This hidden account, these transfers, they're solid evidence." Emily stared at the pile, her jaw tight. "What do I even do with it?" "You protect yourself," Rachel said firmly. "Make copies, store them somewhere safe, and don't let him know you're onto him. If he's planning to move money, you need to be 2 steps ahead." As they talked, Emily's golden retriever Milo padded into the room, a 6-year-old rescue with soft, honey-colored fur and soulful eyes. He laid his head in her lap, sensing her unease. She stroked his ears absently. "He's the only one who still looks at me the same way," she said with a bitter smile. Rachel reached across the table, touching her hand. "You'll get through this, Em, but you have to stay calm. The moment you confront him, he'll shut everything down. Let him think you're clueless." That night, after Rachel left, Emily poured herself a glass of wine and sat in the darkened living room. The city lights shimmered through the rain-streaked windows. She opened her laptop again, tracing the trail deeper. Another receipt surfaced, this one from Benson's fine jewelers. The date was last month. Her pulse quickened. The item description read, "Custom diamond engagement ring, 1.8 carats, platinum setting." Emily froze. The buyer, Logan Pierce. The recipient, Chloe Benson. For a moment, her vision blurred. She set the glass down too hard, spilling wine across the counter. Her mind spiraled. Images of Logan kneeling, Chloe's manicured hands, their laughter over champagne. The humiliation stung, sharper than anger. A ring. For her. She pressed a hand to her chest, breathing shallowly. Every lie, every late-night meeting suddenly made sense. The thought of their upcoming anniversary felt sickening. She paced the room, gripping her phone. Part of her wanted to confront him immediately, to scream, to demand answers. But another voice, colder and sharper, whispered that Rachel was right. If she exploded now, he'd cover his tracks. And she couldn't let that happen. She needed to outsmart him. For once, Logan wouldn't be the only one pulling the strings. By midnight, she had scanned and encrypted every piece of evidence, saving copies to a flash drive she hid inside a hollow decorative candle on her desk. She stared at it for a long time, her reflection flickering in the candle's glass surface. 18 years, she thought. 18 years of love, loyalty, and lies. She whispered to herself, almost like a vow. If he wants war, he'll have it. The rain returned, soft and steady, tapping against the windows like a warning. Upstairs, Logan slept soundly, unaware that the perfect wife he thought he controlled had just begun to take back her life. The rain had stopped just before dawn, leaving a thin mist over the rolling hills of Lakeview, the upscale neighborhood where Emily and Logan lived. By mid-morning, a pale sunlight filtered through the clouds, catching the glass walls of the Pierce family mansion. Emily Carter stood at the window of her studio, staring out toward the wet driveway where her husband's car had disappeared hours earlier. She'd barely slept. Her heart still pounded from the discovery of the jewelry receipt, Logan's name on the payment, and another woman's name as the recipient. Chloe Benson. That name had echoed in her mind all night, as if it had been branded into her thoughts. Emily, 43, still looked younger than her age, her tall, slender frame wrapped in an oversized cardigan, auburn hair twisted into a messy bun. Her pale skin bore the faint fatigue of sleepless nights, and her green eyes, usually calm and bright, were hollow with hurt and disbelief. The quiet hum of the city beyond the hills seemed distant. She wasn't just betrayed, she was being replaced. Rachel had told her to gather evidence before doing anything. "Don't act out of emotion," her friend had said. "Get facts first." So Emily decided to start with someone who might know more than she did, Margaret Pierce, Logan's mother. Margaret had always been a force of nature, the kind of woman who never raised her voice, but could make anyone feel small with a single glance. In her late 60s, she carried herself like a queen, tall, with perfectly styled silver hair, diamond earrings glinting under soft lighting, her posture straight as if she'd been sculpted from ice. Her elegant home in Bellevue was a mirror of her personality, immaculate, sterile, and intimidating. The last time Emily had been there, it had been for a Christmas dinner 5 years ago. A tense evening filled with polite conversation and silent judgment. As Emily drove through the quiet suburbs toward Margaret's estate, her mind raced. Maybe Logan's affair was just a midlife crisis. Maybe Margaret didn't know anything about it. Maybe she was overreacting. But the unease in her gut told her otherwise. The Pierces had always been protective of their wealth, and Margaret had never fully accepted Emily, the daughter of a middle-class teacher and a nurse, as a suitable match for her only son. Margaret opened the door herself, her lips forming a faint, unsurprised smile. "Emily?" she said smoothly, stepping aside. "This is a surprise. Come in." Her voice was calm, almost too calm, the way someone speaks when they already know why you've come. The living room smelled faintly of lavender and old books. A large portrait of Logan's late father hung above the fireplace, a stern-looking man in a navy suit whose presence seemed to dominate the room even in death. Emily sat on the edge of a white sofa, feeling the chill of the room seep into her bones. "Tea?" Margaret asked, already pouring without, waiting for a response. She handed Emily a delicate china cup. "You look tired. Logan keeping you busy?" Emily forced a small smile. "You could say that." She stared into the cup, her fingers trembling slightly. "I wanted to talk to you about something. About Logan." Margaret's expression didn't change. "Oh?" "He's been distant lately. Secretive. I think he might be hiding something." Emily hesitated, waiting for any flicker of surprise or sympathy. There was none. Margaret merely sipped her tea, eyes sharp. "Men in his position carry a lot of stress. You of all people should know that." "This isn't just stress," Emily pressed. "I found a receipt. He bought jewelry for someone, a woman named Chloe Benson." For a brief second, Margaret's hand paused midair before she set her cup down gently. "Chloe?" she repeated, her tone neutral. "Yes, I've heard of her. Logan speaks highly of her work." "She's his assistant," Emily said bitterly. "And apparently, more than that." Margaret folded her hands in her lap, her rings glittering under the light. "Emily, I'm sure this is uncomfortable. But you must understand, Logan is a man with ambitions. The company is growing rapidly. He needs people around him who understand that world." Emily blinked, confused. "What are you implying?" Margaret leaned back, her eyes cold. "Perhaps you should prepare yourself for certain changes. The Pierce family business must continue to evolve. Logan's made decisions that reflect that." Something about her tone made Emily's skin crawl. "What kind of decisions?" she asked quietly. Before Margaret could respond, voices drifted in from the adjacent study. The door wasn't completely closed. One of them, deep and formal, belonged to Mr. Samuel Kent, Logan's longtime lawyer. Emily had met him at a few corporate dinners, a tall, bald man in his 50s, with a neatly trimmed beard and a habit of speaking in precise legal terms. "The transfer will be completed within a month," Kent's voice said. "Once the assets are consolidated under the new trust, Emily Carter's access will be nullified. All documents will bear only Logan's and Chloe Benson's names." Emily froze, her stomach twisted. Margaret's voice followed, lower but clearly audible. "Good. Logan's been far too generous for far too long. Emily was never suited to handle our finances. I'll not have her squander Pierce capital on emotional whims." The room seemed to tilt around Emily. She clutched her cup, realizing her hands were shaking. A roaring sound filled her ears, her breath shallow. They were planning to erase her, from the company, from the family, from the life she'd built for 18 years. She stood abruptly, setting the cup down on the table so hard that it rattled. "I think I've heard enough," she said, her voice trembling. Margaret didn't flinch. "Be careful, Emily," Margaret said softly. "Sometimes knowing too much can be dangerous. Logan doesn't take betrayal lightly." Emily looked into her eyes, cold, unblinking, and saw no trace of the woman who had once hugged her at her wedding, pretending to welcome her into the family. Without another word, Emily turned and left, the heels of her boots clicking sharply against the marble floor. Outside, The air was damp and heavy, carrying the faint scent of rain-soaked pine. She climbed into her car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her mind was spinning. Not only had Logan betrayed her with another woman, he and his mother were plotting to take everything from her. As she drove back toward Seattle, her reflection in the windshield looked almost unrecognizable. There was fear in her eyes, yes, but beneath it, something else had begun to flicker. A cold, hard determination. She had built this life alongside Logan. She wouldn't let them erase her so easily. They wanted a war? She would give them one. The late autumn sky hung low over Seattle, the air crisp with the scent of rain-soaked leaves and sea salt drifting from the harbor. Emily Carter sat in the corner of a small cafe on Queen Anne Hill, the place quiet except for the soft hum of conversation and the clinking of spoons against ceramic cups. The faint warmth of the fireplace painted a golden glow across her face, but her thoughts were far from calm. She had barely slept since that day at Margaret's house. The betrayal had cut so deep, it seemed to echo in her chest every time she breathed. But amidst the grief, a new instinct had begun to take root. Survival. She knew Logan and Margaret were preparing to erase her, and she wouldn't let them succeed. Emily opened her laptop, scrolling through old emails and legal documents. Somewhere buried in the files, she remembered, there had been mention of her cousin Nathaniel Reed, Nate, as she used to call him, who had passed away 3 years ago in Portland. Nate had been older, rugged, a real estate developer with a warm laugh and a reputation for making bold but risky investments. Before his death, he'd promised Emily a share of a property development near Mount Tabor, a forgotten project that had never been transferred into her name. If the records still existed, they could be her lifeline. She reached out to a lawyer recommended by Rachel, a man named Ethan Blake. They had arranged to meet that afternoon. When he arrived, she immediately noticed his unassuming calm. Ethan was in his late 30s, tall with broad shoulders, a square jaw, and neatly trimmed dark hair touched with silver near the temples. He had steady gray-blue eyes that gave the impression of someone who listened before he spoke, and the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw suggested sleepless dedication more than vanity. He wore a charcoal suit, but no tie, exuding quiet professionalism. "Mrs. Carter," he greeted with a firm handshake. His voice was low and even, with the trace of a Pacific Northwest accent. "Rachel told me a little about your situation. I'm sorry you're going through this." "Thank you," Emily said, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. "I need to make sure I still have something in my name. My husband, he's trying to take everything." Ethan nodded, taking a small notebook from his briefcase. "Rachel mentioned your cousin Nathaniel Reed. If he left documentation assigning you any share, we might be able to recover it." Emily handed him an old folder. Yellowed papers, contracts, and an email printout from Nate dated 2 months before his death. "He wanted me to have 10% of the project. I never followed up. I didn't think it mattered." Ethan studied the documents carefully, his brows furrowed in concentration. "It matters now," he said simply. "If the title transfer was initiated, even informally, we can trace it. I can start the process discreetly, so it doesn't alert your husband's legal team." Emily exhaled shakily, relief mingling with disbelief. "You can really do that?" "I can," Ethan replied. "But it has to stay between us. If Logan's lawyer is as sharp as I've heard, any movement in your financial portfolio will be flagged immediately. You'll need patience and absolute silence." The days that followed blurred into long calls, encrypted emails, and tense meetings in quiet corners of cafes and law offices. Ethan worked quickly but cautiously, always careful not to leave digital traces that could lead back to her. Emily found herself admiring his composure. The way he explained legal details in plain language. The way he anticipated her fears before she voiced them. Unlike Logan, who had long grown distant and dismissive, Ethan listened. There was a steadiness in him that felt almost like safety. One evening, they met again in his office in downtown Seattle. The view stretched across the city, the reflection of traffic lights flickering in the glass. Stacks of legal documents covered his desk. Ethan looked up from his computer, his expression more animated than usual. "We found it," he said. "The property stake from your cousin's development. It was never dissolved. It's still active under the old LLC. With the right filings, I can redirect the ownership to your private trust." "Private trust?" Emily repeated, her heart quickening. "Yes," Ethan said, handing her a folder. "A fund in your name, fully separate from the Pierce accounts. It's perfectly legal. Once it's finalized, Logan won't be able to touch a cent of it. Current valuation, roughly $2.3 million. Emily stared at the numbers, the weight of what it meant crashing over her. For the first time in weeks, she felt something like power returning to her veins. $2 million, she whispered. That's more than enough to start over." Ethan gave her a small smile. "It's not about starting over yet. It's about holding your ground. Don't show your hand until you need to." She nodded slowly, the fire in her chest rekindling. "I'll wait," she said, "until the right moment." That moment came sooner than she expected. A few days later, a sleek, cream-colored envelope arrived at her doorstep. It bore the Pierce family crest, an ornate gold P embossed in wax. Inside was a formal invitation. "Logan and Margaret Pierce cordially invite you to a celebration of 20 years of marriage, to be held at the Corinthian Hotel, December 3rd. Emily's hands trembled as she read the fine print. The date was only 2 weeks away. Beneath the elegant script was a list of guests, friends, business partners, political donors. It was clear this wasn't a celebration of love. It was a performance. A stage where they would humiliate her, announce the end of their marriage, and divide assets in front of everyone who mattered in their world. She showed the letter to Rachel that evening. Rachel, petite and sharp-eyed, slammed her coffee cup down. "They're going to make a public spectacle out of you. Logan and his mother want to control the story before you can react." "Not if I control it first," Emily said quietly. Her voice was calm, steady. "Let them think they're setting the scene. I'll be ready." She called Ethan the next day. "It's time," she told him. "I'll go to their celebration, but I won't go as their victim." Ethan hesitated for a moment before saying, "Then we make sure you walk in there with everything they thought they'd taken from you." That night, Emily stood before her mirror, the city lights flickering behind her. Her reflection looked different, sharper, more composed, her auburn hair framing a face no longer ruled by fear. For years, she had been the perfect wife, the silent partner, the woman who smiled through discomfort. But now, she was something else entirely. The game had changed, and Emily Carter was done playing by their rules. The Corinthian Hotel ballroom shimmered under a cascade of crystal chandeliers, the warm glow bouncing off gold-trimmed walls and polished marble floors. The late evening air outside was crisp with a light drizzle, making the city lights shimmer through the tall windows. Guests in elegant gowns and tailored suits mingled, glasses in hand, while a string quartet played softly in the background. Emily Carter entered with measured calm, her auburn hair perfectly styled in loose waves that framed her determined face. She wore a deep emerald gown that hugged her silhouette without ostentation, exuding understated confidence. Her hazel eyes scanned the room, noting every familiar face. Some curious, some judgmental, all waiting for the spectacle Logan and Margaret had meticulously orchestrated. Emily's heart thudded not with fear, but with anticipation. She had spent weeks meticulously preparing, every legal document filed and secured with her lawyer, Ethan Blake's guidance. Her mind replayed the countless hours of planning, from uncovering her hidden inheritance to quietly consolidating evidence of Logan's financial duplicity. She reminded herself that patience and timing were now her most potent weapons. As she made her way to the reserved front row, she spotted Chloe Benson, Logan's young assistant, standing near the stage. Chloe was barely 25, petite, with chestnut hair cut sharply at the shoulders, soft brown eyes that flickered with excitement, and a faint air of entitlement. She looked over Emily with barely concealed curiosity, unaware that this triumphant assistant would soon witness her own complicity unravel in front of the entire room. Margaret Pierce, a statuesque woman of 62 with silver-streaked blonde hair pulled into a tight chignon and piercing ice-blue eyes, ascended the stage. Her tailored ivory dress accentuated her rigid posture and aura of authority. Every movement was precise, deliberate, like the chess master she had always been. She lifted her champagne glass, smiling politely, though her eyes flickered with the faintest trace of tension when she glimpsed Emily in the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," Margaret began, her voice warm but rehearsed. "Thank you all for gathering to celebrate 20 years of our family's milestones and for honoring the dedication of our beloved daughter-in-law, Emily Carter, who has so graciously sacrificed for the family over the years." Her smile was flawless, but Emily's lips twitched in a controlled, almost imperceptible smirk. Logan Pierce stepped onto the stage next, tall and imposing, with angular features softened only by the confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. His dark hair was impeccably styled, and a neatly trimmed beard highlighted his square jawline. Years of business dealings had left subtle creases around his sharp brown eyes that now flickered nervously as they met Emily's calm, unwavering gaze. He opened his mouth to deliver what he imagined would be a dramatic announcement of their divorce and his intentions to divide their assets in his favor. Emily waited, heart steady as he spoke. Logan's tone was measured, rehearsed, every word crafted to elicit sympathy and awe from the room. He paused for effect, expecting murmurs of shock or whispers of admiration. Instead, Emily's poised silence radiated a quiet power that unsettled him. Finally, Logan finished his speech, expecting applause, or at least stunned silence, and turned to the audience, ready to bask in his orchestrated triumph. With deliberate calm, Emily rose from her seat. The room's ambient noise dimmed as attention shifted toward her. She held a thick folder in her hands, fingers firm but elegant, a small signal that the tide of control had shifted. "Before my husband says any more," Emily's voice rang clear, cutting through the murmurs, "I believe everyone deserves to know the truth. For months, my husband and his mother have been using my name to withdraw over $600,000 from our joint accounts, money that should have been preserved for our family." Gasps rippled across the room. Chloe's jaw dropped slightly, her hand instinctively covering her mouth. Margaret's eyes widened, a flash of unease passing through her composed exterior. Logan's face drained of color as he stammered, trying to formulate an immediate defense, but the weight of the evidence was crushing. Emily stepped closer to the stage, her calm demeanor contrasting sharply with Logan's rising panic. "This isn't just about the money," she continued, her voice steady, deliberate. "It's about honesty, integrity, and respect. Values that have been long ignored in this room." Her eyes flicked briefly toward Ethan Blake, who had discreetly taken his place in the back, giving a subtle nod of reassurance. Ethan, tall and commanding, yet quietly unobtrusive, watched the scene unfold with a calm intensity. His gray-blue eyes missed nothing, noting every reaction, every twitch, every falter in Logan and Margaret's practiced performances. Emily's careful preparation and his guidance had brought them to this exact moment, a stage where the balance of power would finally tip in her favor. A low murmur grew into audible whispers as guests processed the revelation. Some turned to one another, shaking their heads in disbelief. Others instinctively pulled out their phones, fingers hovering over record buttons. Chloe's face had gone pale, realizing that she was not only complicit, but now publicly exposed in front of the social elite. Margaret took a step forward, attempting to regain control of the room with a measured hand gesture. "Emily, surely you understand," she began, her voice tight. "This is not how a family handles internal matters." Emily's gaze was unwavering. "No, Margaret. This is exactly how a family handles internal matters when deception has been the norm for years." Her tone was polite, but the edge of authority was unmistakable. She opened the folder, letting the documents slide onto the stage table, neatly arranged for all to see. Bank statements, signed authorizations, and email records. Every piece of evidence meticulously organized, proving every word she had just spoken. The room fell silent. Even the quartet stopped playing, the notes fading into the thick tension that now enveloped the crowd. Logan's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. Margaret's fingers twitched as she struggled to maintain composure, the mask of control slipping imperceptibly. Emily took a slow, deliberate breath, savoring the moment, the culmination of months of strategy, research, and the steady guidance of Ethan Blake. A few minutes later, the murmurs grew into exclamations. Guests whispered among themselves, some nodding at Emily with newfound respect, others staring at Logan and Margaret with shock. Chloe, still rooted to the spot, understood the gravity of her involvement and the potential repercussions. Logan's carefully crafted image had crumbled in an instant. He was no longer in control, and the room's judgment was no longer his to command. Emily returned to her seat, her posture composed, her expression calm. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of relief washing over her. Not triumph, not vengeance, but clarity. The power dynamic had shifted, and for the first time, she was no longer at the mercy of Logan or Margaret. The rain had eased, leaving Seattle's skyline gleaming under the soft glow of streetlights, while the Corinthian Hotel ballroom remained tense with anticipation. Guests lingered, whispers blending with the faint hum of an anxious string quartet. Emily Carter entered quietly, her auburn hair catching the light in gentle waves, her hazel eyes sharp and observant. Tonight, her emerald gown hugged her slender yet athletic figure, emphasizing a controlled elegance that masked the storm of emotions beneath. Every step was deliberate, every breath measured. For months, Emily had gathered evidence, a silent arsenal to reveal the betrayal and corruption she had long suspected, but now could prove beyond doubt. From her vantage point near the stage, she noticed Chloe Benson fidgeting nervously, petite and delicate in a sleek navy dress, her chestnut hair perfectly styled, but her hands betraying slight tremors. Chloe's brown eyes darted around, unaware of the role she would now play in the unraveling of Logan Pierce's carefully constructed facade. Logan, tall, square-jawed, and usually exuding unwavering confidence, paced near the podium. His dark hair and trimmed beard were immaculate, but tonight his posture betrayed tension. Emily could sense the subtle shift. The moment of power was about to swing. Margaret Pierce, the imposing matriarch with her silver-streaked blonde hair coiled tightly, ice-blue eyes, and rigid poise, stood by the side, attempting to maintain her usual aura of authority, yet even she felt the prick of unease. Emily raised her chin, her voice calm yet carrying over the gathered crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "I believe it's time everyone here understands the full scope of deception that has occurred over these past months." A hush fell. Even the quartet paused mid-note. "You will see the correspondence between Logan and his assistant Chloe, documenting secret transactions, hidden accounts, and plans to remove me from the family's trust and assets." At a subtle nod from Ethan Blake, her lawyer and steadfast ally, the lights dimmed, and the first slides appeared on the projector. Ethan, a tall man in his early 40s with salt and pepper hair, a strong jawline, and composed, analytical eyes, stood at the rear, quietly overseeing the presentation, ready to intervene if necessary. His tailored navy suit and calm demeanor gave him a commanding yet unobtrusive presence. The screen illuminated the room with emails, bank statements, and screenshots, each piece meticulously annotated. Emily's pulse remained steady. She observed reactions with careful scrutiny. Logan's face paled visibly, his square jaw clenching as he saw the irrefutable proof of his duplicity. He opened his mouth, but words faltered, swallowed by the weight of evidence. Margaret's fingers trembled ever so slightly, her rigid posture faltering, the thin veneer of control slipping under the scrutiny of friends, colleagues, and family. Chloe covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. She understood now that she had been used, manipulated by a man who had shown affection to exploit her ambition. Petite and vulnerable in her high heels, she quickly turned and exited the room, her sobs quiet but audible, leaving behind the remnants of the illusion she had believed in. The collective murmur of the guests grew into audible whispers, curiosity and shock replacing the polite etiquette that had dominated the evening. Emily's voice, firm yet composed, guided the room through the narrative. "This isn't merely about financial misdeeds," she said, gesturing to the documents projected behind her. "It's about accountability, integrity, and reclaiming what is rightfully mine." The crowd watched intently as each document reinforced her words. Bank transfers logged under her name but diverted to Chloe's benefit. Margaret's recorded conversation discussing ways to bypass legal channels to exclude Emily from inheritance, and private emails coordinating timing and cover-ups. Logan staggered slightly, trying to salvage his dignity, the polished suit doing little to hide the sweat forming on his brow. His once commanding presence had shriveled under the combined weight of public scrutiny and tangible proof. Every carefully orchestrated story he had told had evaporated, leaving him exposed. Margaret's composure cracked further as whispers of disbelief rippled among guests who had long admired her sharp business acumen. Ethan stepped forward, calm and decisive. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice authoritative, "I am here to formally present that all assets, including the Pierce estate, bank accounts, and corporate shares, are legally under Emily Carter's sole ownership." A collective intake of breath filled the room. The documents he placed on the table were impeccable, notarized, stamped, and fully verified. Emily, standing beside him, felt a wave of vindication. Margaret's eyes darted nervously, recalling years of meticulous planning, boardroom maneuvers, and subtle threats to secure her family's wealth. Her decades of power and influence had been met with a strategic precision she hadn't anticipated. Logan's shoulders slumped, his hands shaking slightly, the first genuine moment of defeat he had ever experienced in a public setting. He was no longer the puppet master. The threads had been cut by the very woman he had underestimated. Whispers turned into murmurs of approval directed at Emily. Some guests nodded in respect, acknowledging the calm, methodical precision of her approach. Others, shocked by the scale of deception, could hardly process the layers of betrayal exposed. Chloe's absence was a silent testament to the inevitability of consequence. Those who participate in deceit will eventually face its weight. Emily finally allowed herself a measured smile. It wasn't gloating, it was clarity, a recognition that the strategy she had employed, the patience she had exercised, and the meticulous planning with Ethan had borne fruit. The room's focus had shifted entirely, not on her appearance or her past submissiveness, but on the undeniable truth she presented. Logan, now pale and trembling, attempted to speak, but the room's focus and Emily's calm authority overpowered him. Margaret, despite her years of strategic dominance, found herself unable to assert control. Both had underestimated the meticulousness, patience, and quiet resilience of the woman they had sought to manipulate. The rest of the evening devolved into a subdued, respectful distance. Guests exchanged discreet congratulations with Emily, some offering heartfelt apologies for having doubted her, others simply in awe of the meticulous execution of justice. Logan's credibility crumbled, his career prospects dimmed by the public exposure. While Margaret faced internal investigations for financial misconduct, she could no longer deny. As the evening wound down, Emily's mind was not on vengeance, but on closure. She had not only reclaimed her assets and her dignity, but also established her authority and independence in a sphere that had long tried to marginalize her. Standing tall in the soft glow of the chandeliers, she allowed herself the rarest of emotions: peace. She had done what needed to be done, with grace and precision, and the future belonged to her. The morning sun cast a golden shimmer over the Santa Monica coastline, waves breaking gently against the pier as gulls cried overhead. Emily Carter leaned against the balcony railing of her beachfront apartment, inhaling the crisp, salty air. At 44, she carried herself with quiet confidence, her auburn hair loosely pinned back, hazel eyes reflective yet bright, a faint laugh line tracing the corner of her mouth, testament to the past year's trials and small victories. Her figure, slender and strong, moved with an ease born from hours of Pilates and long walks along the shore. The apartment was filled with sunlight, whitewashed walls, and minimalist decor, reflecting the clarity Emily now felt inside. Inside, her design studio was alive with soft chatter and muted classical music. Rachel Thompson, her longtime friend and confidant, tall, willowy, with pale blonde hair and striking blue eyes, moved briskly between drafting tables. Rachel's gentle humor and unwavering loyalty had been a balm through Emily's turbulent months. Her presence in the studio reminded Emily that trust could be rebuilt and friendships could flourish when honesty prevailed. The studio smelled faintly of cedarwood and ink, a comforting scent that accompanied creativity. Ethan Blake, her lawyer and steadfast ally, now more than a professional connection, leaned casually against a drafting table, reviewing contracts and invoices. His salt and pepper hair had grown slightly longer, and his steel-gray eyes retained their sharp analytical focus, softened by the rare, easy smile reserved for close friends. Ethan's tailored navy sweater and khakis contrasted with the warm, sunlit studio, signaling an informal trust and friendship rather than the formal tension of courtrooms past. Emily's heart occasionally fluttered at the subtle way he lingered near her projects, but she reminded herself that the year had been about rebuilding herself, not rushing into new entanglements. A soft knock at the studio door made Emily glance up. She walked across the polished hardwood floor, her bare feet silent, and opened it to find a small courier envelope lying on the threshold. Curious, she picked it up. The return address was unmistakable: Logan Pierce. Her chest tightened momentarily, but her expression remained serene. She sliced open the envelope with practiced calm, revealing a single sheet of paper inside, neat handwriting scrawled across it. "I have lost everything, but you remain composed. You have won." Emily's first instinct was a flicker of anger, a remnant of old wounds, but she felt only amusement and a deep sense of peace. Logan's attempt to impose guilt or draw her back into the past fell flat against the armor of self-knowledge she had forged over the previous year. She held the paper over the balcony, the sunlight glinting off her engagement ring from a small family heirloom she had reclaimed, and she tossed the letter lightly into the breeze. It fluttered momentarily, catching the wind, and drifted out toward the ocean. Her gaze followed it, eyes tracing the paper as it danced across the waves before being swallowed by the surf. Emily exhaled softly, a smile tugging at her lips. "No," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "I haven't won. I'm free." The statement felt more like an affirmation than a conclusion, a declaration that the past was behind her and her autonomy had been reclaimed. Each day of the past year, from the meticulous gathering of evidence against Logan and Margaret to the careful legal maneuvers with Ethan, had been a step toward this moment. A life reclaimed from deceit and betrayal. In the studio, Rachel approached with a steaming cup of coffee, her blue eyes twinkling with curiosity. "Everything okay?" she asked lightly, noticing Emily's reflective posture and the soft smile playing across her features. Emily handed her a small, freshly printed architectural mock-up. "Better than okay," she replied. "It's all falling into place, and I'm finally free." Rachel's grin widened. "That's what I like to hear. And look at this. Our first major client is sending over the contract today. You've really built something amazing, Em." Emily nodded, feeling the tangible result of months of hard work and independence. The studio, once a dream sketched on paper, now hummed with potential and stability. Later that evening, Ethan and Emily walked along the shoreline, the sand cool beneath their feet, the water gently lapping at their ankles. Ethan, taller than her by a head, had a calm, assured stride. His gray eyes occasionally softened when they met hers, and his easy smile suggested camaraderie, trust, and a subtle warmth that Emily found comforting. They spoke quietly about future design projects, the plans for the studio, and the occasional challenges of running a small business in a post-pandemic economy. Yet beneath every word, a silent acknowledgement lingered, a shared understanding of the battles they had faced together and the mutual respect forged in fire. Emily paused, letting the water curl around her toes, and stared at the horizon. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose. She reflected on the year, the public humiliation of Logan, the painstaking legal victories, and the reclamation of both her financial assets and her dignity. She felt a profound gratitude for the clarity that struggle had brought, a recognition that true victory was not in retribution, but in reclaiming the right to determine her own life, to make her own choices, and to live authentically. A seagull swooped low, calling over the water, and Emily watched it disappear into the distance. The ocean's endless rhythm mirrored the continuous flow of life, sometimes turbulent, sometimes calm, but always moving forward. She bent down to pick up a small piece of driftwood, feeling its smooth surface under her fingers. It was a symbol, she thought, of resilience and transformation, shaped by forces beyond its control, yet still beautiful and whole. Back in the apartment, she settled into her reading nook, Rachel's laughter floating from the studio, Ethan reviewing documents at the nearby desk. The gentle hum of the city blended with the waves outside, creating a peaceful symphony. Emily reflected on the letters, the court victories, and the liberation she had fought to achieve. Her mind, once clouded by betrayal, now brimmed with possibilities. She realized that freedom wasn't a prize taken from someone else, but the state of being fully oneself, untethered by others' deception or manipulation. As dusk fell and the city lights twinkled against the deepening blue of the ocean, Emily allowed herself a deep, unguarded sigh. Her journey had been long, the scars of the past vivid, but the present was hers entirely. She was financially secure, creatively inspired, and surrounded by those she trusted. The envelope from Logan had been the final reminder that her old life, fraught with manipulation and deceit, had ended. What remained was her life, her choices, and her freedom. A life reborn from the trials of betrayal into clarity, empowerment, and peace. Emily stepped onto the balcony once more, the cool evening breeze brushing her face. She gazed out over the Pacific, feeling a profound sense of serenity and strength. Holding the moment in her chest, she whispered to the waves, "Not victory, freedom." The words hung in the salty air, a mantra for the life she had reclaimed and the future she would now shape on her own terms.